Venus and star blessings, everybody. Just wanted to share a few thoughts on transiting Mars in Libra, passing over the south node, the moon's south node in Libra. It's quite an energized portal because it is Mars. And the south node, from an old sort of traditional lens, the south node has a pretty difficult reputation. In certain teachings, the south node is regarded as a malefic. And we know that Mars is also a malefic. And also, in this case, Mars is in its detriment. So there are three compounding factors that bring up challenges with this conjunction that's been applying for the last few days. And so in total, it'll be active for around about a week, I guess. So when you think about it from that perspective, that it's Mars, which is a malefic, Mars is in its detriment in Libra because its rulership sign is Aries. So the opposite sign to Aries is Libra, which places Mars in its detriment. And in ancient traditional astrology, the south node is also considered a malefic point. So those three compounding factors seem to point to perhaps a challenging portal for some people, a challenging energy. The other factor that really kind of expands this even more is that we have a solar eclipse coming up on the 14th of October, which is at 21 degrees of Libra. So it's a new moon, but it's a solar eclipse. So we can see that Mars is tracking the degrees of the solar eclipse, which is soon to come. Given that solar eclipses have a portal of about a time frame of about 6 months, 3 months either side to the actual date of the eclipse, then this energy is very, very significant. The energy is palpable. It's already it's already activated, even though the solar eclipse date hasn't arrived. So we have Mars, which is a malefic, Mars in detriment, and we have the south node, and we have a solar eclipse at 21 degrees of Libra, which Mars has already passed over. When you put all that together, you can see why this energy might be quite animated and activated for certain individuals, and certainly on a collective level in different ways as well, which can be, sort of projected in different different storylines and narratives that are going on the earth plane. There's many, many, many. Where does one begin? But one that comes to mind, of course, is Russell Brand, who's under the microscope at the moment. And, there's a clear division there of people for and or against him. And it's an important issue, even from the point of view of Mars, because Mars in Libra is seeking to establish some kind of balance by understanding other people's perspectives, hearing other people's story, understanding other people's values, whilst at the same time being able to express one's own values and position. So it's that real true art of balance that Mars is seeking to establish here, which is a very difficult task for Mars to accomplish, because this is not his natural domicile. This is not the natural place for Mars. This is Venus's sign. Venus is the one who achieves diplomacy and seeks to achieve balance, and in a lot of cases does achieve it. Mars is not a planet of balance or considering the other side and weighing up the options and seeing both sides. It's a very one-pointed type of energy. It's an energy that corresponds to the will of the soul. It is the lower will of the soul. The highest will is Pluto, which is the soul. Of course, I am drawing in a couple of different schools of thought here, or teachings, one being evolutionary astrology, which considers Pluto to reflect the soul, and Mars is like the servant of Pluto. It's the lower desires, the lower willpower, if you like. And so fundamentally, the relationship between Pluto and Mars, which they are square here, by the way, is a journey of integration of the lower will, personal, self-centered, selfish desires to come in alignment with the soul's ultimate desires for its purpose of evolution. So there's a few layers here. We've got the solar eclipse itself, which I'll come back and speak to soon, is a pretty intense solar eclipse because of the family that it comes from, the Saros series that it comes from, and it has Pluto heavily dominating that energy of that family. So it's a very dominant sort of force and energy, this particular eclipse that's coming up. Further to that, this cycle last occurred in 2004, between 2004 and 2005. So if you're old enough, you can certainly reflect back to that time and think about what was going on in your life at that time. The description of that eclipse at that time was very much connected to sexual attraction, sexual engagements, sexual power, sexual energy, relationships, and a forceful kind of energy around that as well. This particular eclipse coming up doesn't have the same sort of wording around it from the point of view of sexual engagement and so forth, but it does talk to really intense and quick manifestations of things just happening very quickly with this eclipse, and you sort of don't see it coming kind of thing is what the implication is. So from a medieval perspective, Mars being in detriment, when a planet is in detriment, the understanding around that is that it seeks to ultimately express itself outside of the establishment. So in the principle of medieval astrology from the point of view of essential dignities and abilities, which is a planet being in rulership, exaltation, detriment, or fall, there are very specific meanings to those positions. And when a planet is in detriment, it will lose something in some kind of capacity because it doesn't have its full strength, as it were, to express itself in its most natural, inherent, archetypal stance or position. So it can achieve certain things, but it might be at the cost of something else. That's one description of a planet in detriment. And in addition to that, it will also be a planet that will express itself outside of the establishment. So planets in, particularly in rulership, are said to really express themselves in the establishment, consensus reality. In other words, planets in rulership are accepted, acknowledged in society. You know, they're not rubbing up against anybody. Whereas planets in detriment have this tendency to act and speak outside of the norm. And as a result of that, of course, there is some kind of backlash. Always, you know, when you step outside of the establishment, speak up against something, whatever it is, you are the minority. That's just how it works. So people with people who have planets in Libra, I guess, really going through a bit of a challenging time at the moment, whilst this solar eclipse is passing through your Libran house. You could say it's opposite your Aries house as well. We've got the solar eclipse coming up. And so it's a real testing sort of field, if you like, of really the mirror, which is others, of relationship. So we may find ourselves engaged or in communication with, whether it's online or whether it's in person or whether it's with somebody close or whether it's with somebody we barely know. There's a lot of challenges here to be able to stand in your own identity and assert yourself, express yourself. So not losing touch with who you are and what your values are, but at the same time being able to accommodate other people's perspectives. And that's a real that's a real issue in this world. Just take a look around you. There's always a different side to every story. There's always a different perspective. There's always everyone wants to be right. There's always somebody trying to make somebody wrong, which is really just a reflection of the only way I can be right in my position is by making the other person wrong. And of course, Mars is the planet of conflict, is the god of war. So it's a very, very tricky kind of energy here that I think will activate. And I've seen it's already activated quite a bit in certain groups and individuals that I'm just sort of observing from a distance, which I find really interesting. And it's all, in a lot of ways, it's so ego-based, which is very Mars. Mars is such an ego type of planet, it's and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. That's the nature of Mars. Mars is about your own personal willpower and your own personal desires and how you're going to actualize, activate, and achieve those. But, at a very limited sort of level, Mars can be so unaware of the various possibilities, the other side of the story, the other perspective. And so Mars is being really, really challenged here to step into other people's shoes and see it from their side and see it from their perspective, whilst not losing one's own identity and own values and so forth. So you can see just how tricky that would be for Mars, right? It's just not the natural position for Mars to be in. That's why Mars is in its detriment in the sign of Libra. Add to this picture that it's squaring Pluto, which it's an applying square at the moment. So as it passes over the south node, it's forming an applying square to Pluto. That's an incredibly dynamic, intense energy that can lead to, explosive conflict and anger in situations, right? Whether that's in people's personal life or whether that's in certain narratives out there on the arena of life. And also, just from the point of view of evolutionary astrology, and just a few comments that come out of one of Jeffrey Wolf Green's books, which I really love this book. The book is called Relationships, Our Essential Needs by Jeffrey Wolf Green, in case any of you are interested in what I'm reading out of. Now, this is a description of somebody who has Mars in Libra natally, but we can actually take some of these thoughts and consider them just simply with this transit of Mars in Libra, specifically because it is passing over the south node and it is forming a square to Pluto, and it is also highlighting and emphasizing the degree of the eclipse, the solar eclipse in Libra that's coming up. So I think it's very, very important to pay attention to this Mars. And of course, it will also pass over the Libra and Venus star point when it gets to 29 degrees. So a lot of, I mean, it's apparent that it has very much to do with our relationships, Libra. But the issue is the so-called imbalances, perhaps, that are showing up, and also the interactions and engagements and conversations and things that are going on in our life that we are participating in some kind of way, where we are challenged to listen to another person's perspective and actually hear what they're saying. The art of Mars in Libra would be to ultimately achieve that ability. And the downside to it would be that one would get so lost in the stepping into everybody else's world, as it were, to be able to hear their side and understand their values and their perspectives. And through that, Mars can lose its own position, the position that it actually holds in terms of its own values. So that's the fundamental issue and challenge here that is likely to show up for us in different ways. You might just have an encounter with somebody today where there's something that has happened that has upset you, that you don't like, whatever it is. And so you want to have a conversation about it. You might do that directly, or you might do that indirectly. With Mars in Libra, the latter is probably more true. That is that Mars in Libra is not direct. It doesn't really know how to be direct. It's quite challenging to be direct, because that's what Mars would be when it's in Aries, which is its natural domicile. So Jeff says Mars in Libra will correlate to a soul who desires to actualize its karmic and evolutionary intentions through the initiation of relationships with a diversity of types who represent different values, beliefs, and ideas. In this way, the soul is able to expand its consciousness through the reality. In evolutionary terms, the soul is desiring to learn new ways of being in relationships with other people, to challenge the culturally established and sanctioned forms of relationship dynamics, to learn how to balance its needs for independence with its needs to be in relationship, to learn how to give and receive in equal ways, to learn how to understand the nature of its projections onto other people and vice versa, to learn to create, pardon me, new understandings of itself through the information and perspectives of others, and to learn about the karmic law of sexuality that binds people over many lifetimes. As a result of these desires, the Mars in Libra person will be instinctively attracted to many different kinds of people throughout life. Many of these attractions will lead into short-term relationships in which much conversation and discussion will take place, in an exchange of ideas, information, and so on. Relative to the nature of Mars, many of these connections will have a sexual undertone that may or may not be acted on. The instinctual tendency is to act on this sexual feeling, however. Mars in Libra, in and of itself, desires to have the necessary freedom to be able to act on its instinctual attractions to others, including the possibility of sexualizing some of these attractions. It is through involvement with others in various ways that the Mars in Libra person is able to understand the specific nature of their individual reality. Anyway, it goes on for about another couple of pages. But I just wanted to read the first couple of paragraphs, because he does also briefly mention there the issue of challenging the culturally established and sanctioned forms of relationship dynamics, which is literally the same thing that is said in medieval astrology, in that planet in detriment will act outside of the establishment, which means it will not be accepted by the norm, so therefore not accepted by society at large. So I guess those are some interesting points to consider for yourself from the point of view of Mars being, Mars really energizing the Libran house in your chart at the moment. And I'd be interested to know if you've had some encounters or interactions that have brought up these kinds of themes. And if you've been able to allow the experience to really be a mirror of perhaps your own shortcomings, perhaps things that you need to be more clear about, more aware of, and more understanding of the other person's position. Because the fact is, when we are triggered by somebody, there's always value in that experience, although it stirs us up, it upsets us, or whatever the case may be. It's always an opportunity, though, for us to check back in our own behavior, our own reactions, and our own responses, and see, are we just simply being one-sided? Are we just simply being reactive and judgmental, not able to recognize where that other person is coming from? Maybe it's the way they speak, maybe it's something they said, maybe it's the way they've done something that is not in agreement with you, and it's upset you, but they're not even aware of it. They are just responding through their own, I suppose, unconscious, subconscious components, if you like. Maybe they are just completely unaware of you and being able to hear you or see you from the position you're coming from. So it could be going both ways, but the point being that when we have this understanding, we can just simply step back and examine our own self, because whoever's triggered us, that's just the mirror. It's a mirror reflecting back to us something that we can perhaps improve on our own abilities to communicate, to listen, to understand. Remember, Libra is about many things, but it's certainly about diversity, understanding the diversity of the myriad of different values that people hold, and being able to hold space for that, even though if you're not in agreement with it. We don't have to agree with something from the point of view of you are taking it on as though it's your own value or belief, but we can hold space for that and just simply acknowledge that that is the other person's style, value, belief, process, thought, way of doing things, whatever it is. Because at the end of the day, we are all evolving, we are all learning. And when it comes to wisdom, true wisdom and deep knowledge, no one owns it. There are many, many teachers that have come through history in various fields, not just in astrology. But at the end of the day, especially when we're talking about the unity of sky and earth, when we're talking about God's language, which is the stars, the cosmos, all of us that are studying and practicing astrology are just trying to have a better understanding, to have a deeper level of insight for ourselves, if we are practitioners, for our clients, If we are teachers for our students can teach us many, many things as well. Everyone is a student in the school of Earth, and no one owns anything, whether it's wisdom or knowledge, or whether it's even a material thing. And I say that because the material world, it's such an illusion. It's got such a hold on, people's false sense of security, because they think I own this or I own that, so I'm in a stronger position. I've got this status, I've got that, I've written 5 books, I've got a $500,000 car, and and all this sort of stuff, right? Which is very personality based, very out of touch with the divinity of the meaning of things. Because when everyone goes, does anybody take anything with them? You don't even take your body with you. Now, if that's not enough to show us that really we don't own anything, then we're missing the mark if we don't have that understanding. And that includes, as I said, the different levels of wisdom and knowledge that we attain as we walk this earth. People seem to like to take ownership or claim rights over lots of different things. And whilst there are some pioneers, who make discoveries, and I acknowledge that, absolutely. But even within that, that's been born out of something that is far deeper than just a person's own idea. It comes from the oneness where all is one and everything is connected. So, yeah, I guess Mars in Libra is a great opportunity to just really assess our own ability to hold space for all the different positions that people take, no matter what it is. And again, like I said, that's not an easy thing for Mars to do, because it's not the nature of Mars. It is square Pluto, which is a very, very intense dynamic energy, that can be very explosive, that can cause the biggest sort of explosion of anger, or conflicts and fighting and battles and all that sort of stuff. So it's a real challenging little window we've got happening here, and approaching the South Node by tomorrow, which perhaps will, for some, might link to matters that were going on back in 2004 and 2005. Not for everyone, but for some people that might be a significant timeline to track, because it will it can help you understand what's coming up at the present moment, and at a more healthier or positive level, you can just simply, if you're old enough, that is, just simply see how much you have grown, since 2004 and 2005, how much you have grown as a person within the world of all your relationships. Do your relationships look the same as they did back then? Do you, repeat the same patterns, attract the same partners with the same issues, and face the same conflicts? And, all those sorts of things are basically opportunities for us to just learn and grow and evolve. That's really what the Earth School is for. So no one owns anything, doesn't matter who they are. That's just my opinion. You can certainly bring your opinion forth. That's what this presentation was about. It's really about recognizing that everyone does hold a different position. But I guess my comment about no one owning anything, That's at the highest, deepest, most profound spiritual level that has got nothing to do with opinions. That's just a fact, a spiritual truth, if you like. So it's not even my opinion. It's just an understanding and knowing that one must arrive at within themselves. No one can tell you that and you just take it on and believe it. You really have to see it yourself, understand it yourself, basically. All right, I'll see you guys soon with the solar eclipse. Much love, and let me know of your thoughts. Bye for now.